The Corruption Lord's transformation continued, its body expanding into a grotesque cathedral of crystal and tainted flesh. Each of its multiple heads now displayed different aspects of corruption's power, one dripping with iridescent ichor, another formed entirely of pulsing crystal, a third composed of writhing tentacles that seemed to drink in light itself. "Behold true mastery of change," it roared, its voice resonating through multiple throats. Waves of corrupt energy pulsed from its massive form, accelerating the taint in everything they touched. Trees twisted into new shapes, their bark becoming crystalline flesh. The ground itself seemed to breathe, pulsing with veins of corruption that spread like spider webs. Silver stood his ground on the lowest platform, the shadow crown manifesting with new intensity. The patterns etched in his skin responded to the proximity of such concentrated corruption, but not with the revulsion one might expect. Instead, they seemed eager, hungry. The Rosser blade hummed in his grip, its transformed metal sensing opportunity. Above, Haven's Rise's defenders fought with desperate courage. Elena's rangers had switched to crystal-tipped arrows soaked in Morris's latest purifying compounds. Where they struck corrupt flesh, the taint momentarily recoiled. But their supplies were limited, and the Corruption Lord's presence was overwhelming their treatments. "The south support structure is failing," Marcus shouted from his position. The former quartermaster led a team attempting to reinforce the wooden beams with treated bracers, but corruption was spreading faster than they could work. "We're losing the whole section." Sarah's voice cut through the chaos with practiced authority. "Fall back to secondary positions." "Morris, status on those purified crystals?" "They're working, but the effect is too localized," the alchemist replied, frantically adjusting his arrays. "We need something to amplify their range, create a larger purification field." The Corruption Lord chose that moment to demonstrate its tactical intelligence. Massive tentacles of pure taint erupted from multiple points simultaneously, targeting not just the fortress tree's supports but also the platforms containing Morris's crystal arrays. Lesser corrupted beasts surged forward in coordinated waves, forcing defenders to divide their attention. Silver acted without hesitation. Shadow form let him flow between levels with liquid grace, the Rosser blade leaving trails of pure darkness in its wake. Where corruption touched his shadows, it was transformed, not destroyed, but purified into clean power he could wield. Each victory over taint made him stronger, the patterns in his skin growing more complex as they absorbed and refined corrupt energy. "Interesting," the Corruption Lord's main head observed, genuine curiosity in its twisted voice. "You do not simply destroy corruption. You transform it. Perhaps we are not so different." "We are nothing alike," Silver replied, gathering shadow energy around him like a storm. "You spread chaos. I offer control." The creature's laugh shook Haven's Rise to its foundations. "Control? There is no controlling change. There is only surrendering to it. Observe." Its form shifted again, this time splitting into multiple smaller entities that retained a hive-mind connection. They attacked from different angles, each one displaying unique corrupt abilities. Crystal shards launched like artillery while tentacles of pure taint sought to ensnare defenders. Waves of transformative energy threatened to overwhelm Morris's cleansing fields. But in this moment of crisis, Silver saw opportunity. The Corruption Lord's divided form meant divided power. More importantly, he understood something fundamental about his own abilities. Shadow wasn't corruption's opposite, but its refined form. What he absorbed, he could repurpose. He caught Sarah's eye across the battlefield and jerked his head toward Morris's crystal arrays. The commander understood immediately. "Everyone off the lower platforms," she ordered. "Elena, covering fire. Marcus, get those civilians higher." As Haven's Rise's defenders retreated upward, Silver unleashed his full power. The Shadow Crown exploded into a corona of pure darkness that responded to his will like an extension of his body. The Rosser blade became a conductor for shadow energy, transforming everything it touched. Instead of fighting corruption directly, he began to convert it systematically. Each tendril of taint that touched his shadows was purified, adding to his strength. The patterns etched in his skin pulsed with absorbed power, growing more elaborate with each victory over corruption. Silver launched himself skyward on platforms of solid shadow, each construct materializing beneath his feet for a split second before dissolving as he ascended. The Corruption Lord's massive form loomed before him, its crystalline tower reaching toward Haven's Rise's highest levels. Every segment of its twisted body pulsed with different manifestations of taint, some launching salvos of crystal shards, while others extended writhing tentacles of pure corruption. The Shadow Crown expanded around him, no longer just a symbol but a full battle regalia of living darkness. Shadow-forged armor flowed across his form, each piece an extension of his will. The Rosser blade sang in his grip, its transformed metal drinking in ambient light as power gathered along its edge. Your shadow tricks will not save them, the Corruption Lord's voices resonated from multiple mouths, each one distorted by different aspects of taint. Crystal formations erupted from its flesh in fractal patterns, forming an ever-shifting maze of corrupt geometry. We are Legion. We are endless. We are... Silver cut off its boast with a devastating combination of attacks. Shadow-forged spears materialized around him in concentric rings, each one precisely targeted. With a thought, he launched the first volley. The spears pierced crystalline defenses with surgical precision, their purifying touch converting corruption into clean darkness that he could control. Where they struck, the creature's flesh began to transform, not destroyed, but refined into purer shadow stuff. The Corruption Lord retaliated with waves of transformative energy so concentrated they warped the air itself. Lesser creatures caught in these pulses twisted into new forms, their bodies reconstructing themselves in impossible ways. But where this power met Silver's shadows, it found itself being systematically dismantled and repurposed. Silver wove between corrupt attacks with fluid grace, each movement launching new shadow constructs. Massive claws of pure darkness grasped crystalline limbs, holding them in place while shadow-forged blades struck at weak points. Tendrils of purifying power sought out corruption's core, converting its chaotic energy into controlled strength that fed back into his abilities. The patterns etched in his skin evolved with each victory over taint, forming increasingly complex circuits of shadow energy. Every piece of corruption he purified added to his understanding, refined his technique. The Rosser blade became an extension of this growing mastery, its edge trailing shadows that could cut through reality itself. From the fortress tree above, Haven's Rise's defenders adapted to his fighting style. Elena's rangers launched crystal-tipped arrows through gaps he created in the creature's defenses. Morris's arrays pulsed in harmony with his shadow energy, creating zones where corruption's hold weakened. Sarah directed it all with tactical precision, ensuring every strike counted. But the Corruption Lord was far from defeated. Its form continued to shift and adapt, each transformation bringing new threats. Crystal spires erupted from its flesh like terrible trees, their branches launching projectiles that could pierce shadow-forged barriers. Tentacles of pure taint sought weaknesses in Silver's defense, probing for any gap in his concentration. You think yourself a master of change? The creature roared, its voices shaking Haven's Rise to its foundations. You have merely scratched the surface of transformation's true power. Its body began to ripple, corruption flowing like liquid metal as it attempted its most ambitious change yet. Crystal and tainted flesh merged in split and nauseating patterns, forming a wraith-like entity that towered over the battlefield. Each movement left trails of corruption in the air itself, creating a three-dimensional maze of taint that threatened to engulf everything in its reach. Silver met this escalation with calculated precision. The Shadow Crown pulsed as he gathered power for a decisive strike. Darkness coalesced around him in layers, each one more refined than the last. The Rosser blade hummed with concentrated energy, shadows flowing along its length like eager servants. You mistake complexity for mastery, he said, his voice carrying despite the chaos. Let me show you true darkness. What followed was an exhibition of shadow mastery beyond anything he'd attempted before. Multiple constructs manifested simultaneously, each one moving with perfect coordination. Shadow-forged warriors emerged from his aura, each one an extension of his will. They wielded weapons of pure darkness, striking at the Corruption Lord from dozens of angles. Where their blades met tainted flesh, they left trails of purifying energy that spread like cracks through crystal. Massive hands of living shadow reached up from below, grasping the creature's lower segments. Their touch began a systematic conversion of corruption into refined power. The transformation spread like a wave, each victory over taint adding to Silver's strength. The Rosser blade became a conductor for pure shadow energy. Each strike sent out ripples of transformative power that could affect multiple targets. Corruption didn't just die when touched, it was reformed, purified, elevated into something more controlled and purposeful. Barriers of solid darkness intercepted the creature's attacks, not just blocking them but absorbing and converting their energy. Each wave of corruption that struck his defenses only made them stronger, more refined, more precise in their purpose. The battle reached its apex as Silver engaged the Corruption Lord's core directly. Shadow-enhanced speed let him strike from multiple angles almost simultaneously, each blow precisely calculated to transform rather than destroy. The creature's defenses began to crumble as purified power ate through layers of taint, converting chaos into controlled strength. Blood trickled from old scars as the Corruption Lord gathered its remaining power, crystalline flesh pulsing with concentrated taint. Its towering form began a final, desperate transformation, corruption flowing like molten glass as it attempted to overcome Silver's purifying assault. Multiple mouths opened in a deafening roar that shook crystals free from Haven's Rise's highest branches. You dare to think your shadows can match primal corruption? The creature's voice resonated through multiple throats, each one distorted by different aspects of taint. We are the first change, the final transformation. The attack came from every direction at once. Crystal spears launched in devastating volleys while tentacles of pure corruption sought to ensnare and transform. Waves of taint energy radiated outward with such intensity that reality itself seemed to warp and buckle. But Silver had been waiting for this moment of desperation. The patterns etched in his skin blazed with accumulated power, each one a circuit of refined shadow energy. The Shadow Crown expanded into a full manifestation of his mastery, darkness given perfect form and purpose. You are not transformation, he replied, gathering shadow energy around the Rosser blade. You are stagnation masquerading as change. The strike came with the inevitability of nightfall. Shadow-forged constructs moved in perfect synchronization, each one targeting a specific weakness in the Corruption Lord's defenses. Where they struck, taint didn't just die, it was elevated, purified into something greater. The Rosser blade became a conductor for this power, its edge trailing darkness that could cut through the very fabric of corruption. Silver wove between crystal shards and corrupt tentacles with fluid grace, each movement launching new attacks. Shadow spears pierced tainted flesh while massive claws of pure darkness grasped and held crystalline limbs. But these were merely prelude to his true strike. With perfect precision, he drove the shadow-wreathed Rosser blade into the Corruption Lord's core. The creature's defenses, already weakened by waves of purifying energy, offered little resistance. As the blade sank deep, Silver released the full power he'd accumulated. Shadow energy exploded outward from the point of impact, but this was no mere destructive force. Each wave of darkness carried purifying power, transforming corruption into refined strength. The change spread through the creature's massive form like cracks through crystal, converting chaos into controlled power. The Corruption Lord's scream shifted pitch as its body began to dissolve, not into death, but into pure shadow essence. Layer by layer, corruption gave way to refined darkness. Crystal formations shattered and reformed as clean energy, while tainted flesh transformed into shadow stuff that Silver could command. When it was done, when the last echo of the creature's scream faded from the air, Silver stood wreathed in power. The shadows around him moved with new purpose, strengthened by converted energy. The patterns in his skin had evolved into perfect geometries of control, while the Rosser blade hummed with accumulated strength. Haven's Rise's defenders watched in awe as purified shadow energy spread from the battle site, converting nearby corruption into clean power. Where this energy touched their barriers and treatments, it strengthened them, adding new layers of protection against taint. Sarah's voice carried from the command platform, "Morris, are you seeing this? The corruption readings. Nearly zero in the immediate area, the alchemist confirmed, his instruments registering the change. The shadow energy, it's not just destroying the taint. It's transforming it into something else. Something stable,